We generate more data today by living our everyday lives than ever before. And for better or worse, this data helps drive our digital economy. When available to our adversaries, massive amounts of data on American people can also be used for more nefarious purposes, including undermining faith in democracy and disrupting public health. We'll be holding a major election this year in the United States, and looking at the state of our digital ecosystem, I'm concerned about the role that widespread mis- and disinformation could play in the process. This question is for Mr. Lewis and also Ms. Gorman. When Americans' data and communications networks are vulnerable to foreign adversaries, how can it be used against them, particularly when it comes to mis- or disinformation?
One of the things we've seen with the ability to collect massive amounts of data and process it, it allows you to improve your messaging, right? It allows you to identify people who might be more accepting of your message. It allows you to identify themes and topics that are going to have political resonance. In some ways, the task of the foreign influence operator is similar to the task of anyone who works in politics. You want to figure out how to persuade people to do something different from what they were thinking. And I think the Russians have proven the ability to do this. What's interesting and worth watching, Iranian propaganda is still terrible, but Chinese propaganda has improved since 2016. So I'd say Russia and China will definitely go out of their way to interfere with the election.
Thank you. Ms. Gorman?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that completely, and would add that the more we know about someone, the easier they are to influence, much in the way that the technology platforms collect massive amounts of data about us so that they can keep us engaged and keep us on the platforms. A foreign propaganda operation can do the same thing, can create divisions, can identify where particular swing districts may be vulnerable and what messages would appeal to them, either to vote for a certain candidate or even just to stay home that day from the polls. So there's an incredible amount of vulnerability, particularly when paired with algorithms that can selectively uprank and downrank content according to objectives. And I think that's really the concern around apps like TikTok.
Now, the Philippines has accused China's Coast Guard of dangerous maneuvers after Chinese boats shadowed a Filipino vessel and repeatedly blocked its attempts to deliver food and fuel to fishermen. The incident took place around the disputed Scarborough Shoal in South China Sea on Thursday and Friday. And this comes days after the Philippine Coast Guard made similar accusations against Chinese boats in the same region.
Every time we come here, I'm really nervous. We don't know what will happen. Maybe they will do what they did before. They might fire a water cannon or force us to leave.
Scarborough Shoal, a triangular chain of reefs and rocks, it's become a flashpoint between the two countries ever since China seized it from the Philippines back in 2012. In the latest incident, Filipino and Chinese boat kept issuing repeated radio challenges to each other while accusing the other of encroachment on their waters. Despite the blocking attempts, the Filipino boat was able to deliver fuel and other provisions to 19 fishing boats. According to the authorities, over 385,000 Filipino fishermen depend on waters located to the west of the country. The disputed shoal is located around 240 kilometers west of Philippines. Even last year, several incidents, including collisions between the vessels of two countries, were reported. Chinese ships even blasted water cannons at the Philippine boats. Since then, Beijing has deployed patrol boats in the region, which Manila repeatedly accuses of harassment. Beijing claims almost the entire South China Sea, despite an international tribunal ruling that its assertions have no legal basis.
Now, amid the rising tensions in the Indo-Pacific, the U.S. is likely to deploy nearly half of its aircraft carriers in the Western Pacific this year. And military analysts anticipate this is to counter the increasing military activity in the region by China and North Korea. Now, there are currently 3 U.S. aircraft carriers in the Western Pacific Ocean, and 2 more are scheduled to arrive. And their arrival will mark the first time that 5 of the 11-strong carrier contingent would operate in the region. And according to the reports, the USS Abraham Lincoln was spotted heading out of its home port in San Diego and sailing towards the Western Pacific on February 5th. Now, the USS George Washington is also expected to be deployed in the region. Now, to replace the USS Ronald Reagan, which will be relocated, and in addition to the USS Ronald Reagan, the USS Carl Vinson has been stationed, and the USS Theodore in Hawaii. Now, they're both expected to stay in the Western Pacific until April and July, respectively. Analysts say that the surge in carrier deployments is designed to reassure regional allies and partners as well as deter adversaries such as China and North Korea. Washington's show of strength comes as China ramps up military activity near Taiwan Strait. Now, remember that US is opposed to Beijing's attempt to take Taiwan by force and is committed to supplying arms to Taipei. Now, tensions in the South China Sea and Pyongyang's growing activity in the region also poses concerns for the US. And analysts say that Washington's move is aimed at signaling its ability to work on several fronts and tackle multiple strategic hotposts.
The Pacific is very important to the United States. Three successive administrations have made it a priority. It's a priority for the Biden administration. Why? Because so much of our commerce goes through that region. So many of our major issues involve our partners in that region. It is a critical area. It's dominated by the People's Republic of China. Why? Because what they are threatening in regards to the China Sea, South China Sea, so much of the commerce goes through there. Because of our concern of China using military might over Taiwan. Because of their coercive economic policies that are threatening the free commerce of the world, because of their human rights records, the Uyghur population. These are areas of major concern to the United States. There are national security interests. So the region is very important, and being able to deal with the challenges created by China is a major issue for us.
We have seen in the latest Munich security report that that part of the world has increased their defense spending significantly, and that also includes China. Is there an arms race in that part of the world?
I know that China is increasing their military spending, but let's take a look at some of our allies. Japan is significantly increasing theirs, not so much to counter China, but to be a partner of the free world. Right now, the front line is Ukraine. And what happens in Ukraine affects the Indo-Pacific region. I think Japan understands that. I think our allies in the region understand that. So yes, we are seeing that region recognize there are security concerns. And those security concerns may be global in one region, will come to another region.
One of your colleagues earlier was telling me that the United States could soon impose sanctions on China in the context of their support to Russia. Do you agree with that?
We have imposed sanctions against Russia. We expect countries to honor those sanctions, not just the United States. It's been the free world, the global community has imposed sanctions against Russia because of its incursions into Ukraine. We want those sanctions honored. And when a third country allows products to be imported from Russia, they're violating the spirit of what we've done on sanctions. And yes, particularly in the energy sector, there is concern about China, and those areas are being looked upon as to whether we can tighten the sanctions, not so much to penalize China, but to make sure that they're not supporting the war effort by Russia.
But the Europeans are currently, as we speak, preparing a new round of sanctions that are likely to hit companies in mainland China. Is this a step that the U.S. is considering to take too?
It's an area that we're looking at. We are working, Congress is working with the administration as to how we can enforce the sanctions against Russia, and that will require greater cooperation of other countries.
It is imperative that Congress enables American commercial enterprise with be able to compete with China's rapid technological development. This subcommittee has worked in a bipartisan manner to address critical issues like spectrum availability, streamlining satellite and space permitting, AI, cybersecurity, wireless, and more. Our shared goal is to keep America at the forefront of enterprise and, of course, to remain safe. We all know China's digital Silk Road is rapidly acquiring the building blocks for 5G and, yes, even 6G, global digital dominance. We talk a lot in Congress about the dangers and threats of TikTok, which is important. However, if China wins the 5G race and develops a software that rides on top of the next generation networks, I worry that the Chinese Communist Party will leverage that innovation against us in all sectors, energy, healthcare, AI, and everything. In Florida, China poses real risk to critical communications infrastructures, including manufacturing equipment, secure devices. But other examples include the Port of Panama City, located in my district, or Cecil Air and Spaceport, which is also in Florida, along with Cape Canaveral.
CCP-controlled drone companies. Do you believe it's a good or a bad idea that these drones are being used in the United States that are linked to Communist China?
DJI sits at the heart of China's military-civil fusion strategy, which breaks down barriers between the civilian and military institutions to mobilize the former in service of the latter. So DJI drones collect vast amounts of sensitive data, everything from high-resolution images of critical infrastructure to facial recognition technology and remote sensors that can measure even an individual's heart rate. Compounding the DJI risk is their capacity for geofencing. So they can use GPS data. DJI can decide whether one of its drones will function in a given area, allowing the company to turn down or turn off entire fleets of drones. I think the ability to deactivate American drones shouldn't be entrusted to a foreign entity, least of which the CCP. There are myriad examples where drones are incredibly impactful during times of crisis, but also impacting and improving the lives of everyday Americans to buy something online and have it delivered by a drone. This is the future of where we're going. The unfortunate reality is that China maintains more than a monopoly in this area. Over 80% of drones are produced by China. They have invested heavily and subsidized these companies and industries in ways that we haven't, and there is a current lack of market competitors. I think, well, unfortunately, as we've seen with ByteDance, as we've seen with Huawei, we're forced to wage a war of attrition against these companies by slowly eating into their market share, and that will require steps from, I think, Congress, but also at the state and local level to slowly weed out these companies from their supply chains and try to prop up alternatives, whether they're from the United States or allied countries like South Korea and Japan.
Mr. Lewis, there are a lot of concerns about China and our telecommunications equipment, and rightfully so. However, we cannot neglect threats we face from other adversaries as well. How are the capabilities of Russia, Iran, for instance, and North Korea developing, and what proactive steps should we be taking to combat infrastructure equipment made by these foreign actors from entering our networks?
That's a great question, and it refers back to Ranking Member Matsui's comments, which is if you took apart a 5G box, from whether it was Huawei or Ericsson, you'd find it depends on American equipment, it depends on Chinese equipment. When you look at the software, it's largely American, it's largely Chinese, but the Russians also are strong in software, and the software vulnerability is one we haven't paid as much attention to. Weirdly enough, the North Koreans have subcontracting companies that make software for Western companies. So if you're using a European product, it may have your North Korean software in it, and you won't even know. So manufacturing side, largely China. The software side, Russia and North Korea are also involved.